California is absolutely one of the most beautiful states we have here in America. I'm fortunate enough to call it home, meaning I live in close proximity to some beautiful places. Even though my favorite spots in California do tend to be up north and I live in the south, that's not a problem since flights are never too expensive. With that in mind, I've had the chance to see some incredible scenery in the state, and one of my favorite things to see in nature are waterfalls. We have quite the variety of waterfalls here in California, with some of them flowing year-round and others, especially the ones down south, being a bit more seasonal. In this list, talking about my 10 favorite waterfalls I've seen in the state, I'll be sure to mention not only what I like about the falls, but also what time of year is best to see them. Now before we get started, there's two caveats I want you to be aware of. One, I obviously haven't seen every waterfall in the state, so this list may look a little different than yours. A few that are still in my to-do list are Rainbow Falls, located at Devil's Postpile National Monument on the east side of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Alamir Falls is one of two tidal falls that we have in the state, flowing directly into the Pacific Ocean. And Black Star Canyon Falls is probably my top bucket list waterfall in Southern California, though it might still be a while before I make the trip because it only flows well after a good rain. My second caveat is yes, Yosemite waterfalls do dominate the top of my list. I know it's relatively predictable, but it really is one of the most amazing places in the world for waterfalls. Number 10, Three Sisters Falls. We're going to start things off with two waterfalls located pretty close to home. Both are situated in the mountainous Cleveland National Forest, and this is the only waterfall on this list that can only be accessed by a non-paved road. There's a 4.1 mile out and back hike to get to this one with about 1,000 feet of elevation gain, but it's really not so bad in my opinion. And it's absolutely worth it because this is a unique waterfall. It's split into three tiers with a cumulative height of probably around 150 feet if I had to take a guess. On a nice warm day, the small bottom layer is sometimes used as a slide, which is pretty cool, but the more spectacular tiers are easily the upper two. The middle one will be the easiest to get a good look at, and it's honestly quite a lot bigger than it appears on video. The upper tier is likely my favorite though, and it's pretty challenging to get a good look at it. You'll have to take this sketchy spur trail, and there's not a lot of room for error when you're walking along this thing. But each level, the falls are really beautiful for what they are, and it amazes me that we have something like this in San Diego County. Three Sisters Falls is probably the most seasonal waterfall on this list though, so I'd only really recommend visiting in the winter or early spring. Number 9, Cedar Creek Falls. Just a stone's throw away in the same national forest, Cedar Creek Falls is one that I've seen a couple times now, and I never get tired of both the hike and the payoff. I first visited the falls in February 2022 after 2 days of significant rainfall and thought the results were very nice. I love the rock formations that form almost like a punch bowl which boxes in the waterfall. I assumed this was probably about as much water as it gets until I had done some research and discovered that this thing goes crazy if you visit at the right time. In January of this year, during the midst of the wettest winter I've seen living in San Diego, we made a return trip to Cedar Creek Falls, and wow, it was insane. The scenery during the 5.5 mile out and back trail was a lot more green than it was before. And on my first visit, there were some minor river crossings where you could avoid getting wet, but this time you had to go knee deep in the water 3 separate times. When we got to the falls, I was sure that this had to be about as much water as it gets. As long as you're willing to get a little wet, come see these falls after a ton of rain has been dumped in the winter. Oh, and by the way, you do need a permit to hike this one, but it's easy to get your hands on, so don't let it deter you from visiting. Number 8, Mossbury Falls. Perhaps the most unique waterfall on this list in terms of how you get there and the actual falls itself, Mossbury absolutely stood out as one of our favorites in the state. There's no real trails to get there, so what you'll have to do is walk along these active train tracks until you see a spur trail to the falls. No, this isn't the safest hike in the world, but if you use good judgment and move off to the side whenever a train comes by, you'll be fine. As the name suggests, the different streams of water look like they're coming straight out of the moss, and it is so wide too. I just love how green it is around here, and the waterfall is so perfectly able to complement its surroundings as it flows into the Sacramento River. I also love that someone put this little swing up here. I had too much fun on that. We visited Mossbury Falls in May 2022, but any time of year will work because the falls are fed by underground springs. Number 7, Tokoba Falls. One of the most underrated waterfalls I've seen in California, Tokoba Falls and the hike to get there is one of the best hidden gems of Sequoia National Park. The 3.8 mile out and back journey takes you through some beautiful alpine territory with just the perfect amount of snow to top things off. Tokoba Falls itself is one giant cascade that stands 1,200 feet tall, but it's got this main section that you can get right up next to. It's a super powerful waterfall, especially in May when we went because all the snow that feeds the falls are starting to melt. I'm not sure why more people don't talk about this one, but I definitely recommend it. Number 6, Wapama Falls. This waterfall might be the most surprisingly massive one I've ever seen. It stands 1,080 feet tall, and nearly all of that height is real waterfall, not like the cascades of Tokoba Falls. It's even considered one of the top 150 tallest falls in the world, which is amazing considering how few people talk about this thing. It can be found in the Hetch Hetchy unit of Yosemite National Park, an area that so few people visit because it is pretty remote. But when you get there, you'll be treated to a gorgeous 4.6 6.7-mile out and back hike to the falls, with the smaller Tuilala Falls there as well. Though Wapama Falls does flow year-round, its peak flow is going to be in May or June, and sometimes what will happen is the falls will literally swallow the trail bridge crossing its base, making the falls impossible to pass. When we went, it wasn't quite this extreme, but there was mist flying around everywhere, almost blinding you whenever you did look up at the falls. I personally found this a lot of fun though, and when I could see Wapama Falls, I couldn't believe how absolutely enormous it was. This is probably the most overlooked waterfall on this list. Number 5, McWay Falls. One of the most iconic waterfalls in California, McWay Falls absolutely lives up to the hype. It's going to be one of the most popular spots in Big Sur no matter what time of year you choose to visit, but it does flow year-round, which is nice. Now the reason I've decided to put this a little 80-foot tall waterfall above the 1,000+ foot Wapama Falls is because this is such a relaxing and tranquil spot. The way it flows into the ocean is so unique, and that little cove it's in has one of the most perfect beaches I've seen in terms of straight appearance. The watercolor is an incredible turquoise, the rock formations are gorgeous, and yeah, McWay Falls is just the most magnificent compliment, even down to where it's positioned. I know a lot of people don't like that you can't get up close to this one, but this view would not be the same with people in it, and plus I'd think the waterfall would be more impressive from afar due to its surroundings anyways. If you did want to see a tidal waterfall up close, well, check out the aforementioned Alamir Falls. It takes some effort to get to that one, but it's one of the only opportunities in the world to get up close to a tidal waterfall. Number 4, Vernal Falls. For the longest time, I had seen and heard of this waterfall, but I didn't know exactly where it was located. When I found out it was way up north near Mount Shasta, it was honestly one of the things that really made me want to take a full-on California road trip, probably up to a year before we actually did it. And for me, it was well worth the wait. Vernal Falls is one of the most unique waterfalls I've ever seen and one of the most beautiful as well. It was called the 8th wonder of the world by President Theodore Roosevelt, and I can understand why. Vernal Falls stands 129 feet tall, but more impressively has a width of 250 feet with those streams that appear out of the moss like Moss Spray Falls. Similarly, I also love how green the area is around Vernal Falls, and I think its pool below has a beautiful color to it as well. Another something great is Vernal Falls flows almost exactly the same year round because it is fed by underground springs. So there's no excuse not to see this thing if you're anywhere remotely close. Vernal Falls deserves its recognition. And now, onto the top 3, which are all Yosemite waterfalls. I warned you guys. Number 3, Vernal Falls. I absolutely adore this waterfall, and I have some great memories being on the mist trail and getting pelted by water because of the sheer power of this thing. But unlike Wapama Falls, which does something similar, there will be plenty of opportunities to see Vernal Falls without being blinded. The trail provides so many different looks at Vernal Falls and even allows you to get right on top of it, which I love. But I think this is one of those self-explanatory waterfalls that makes the top 3 because it is just so incredible on its own. 317 feet down a gorgeous granite cliff with black streaks surrounding the falls. Now, this isn't one of those waterfalls you can just see from Yosemite Valley. You will have to hike 3 miles out and back to get here, but please, I beg you, do not stop, because if you do the full 6.5-mile mist trail loop, you'll get to see Vernal Falls and my number 1 waterfall on this list. And that alone is enough of a reason for me to say that if you can only do one hike in Yosemite National Park, the mist trail should be it. Or better yet, if you can get a permit for Half Dome, you can go even further and summit the park's most iconic peak. Number 2, Yosemite Falls. What will probably be most people's number 1 waterfall in California, it's hard to argue against Yosemite Falls. It stands an insane 2,425 feet tall, making it North America's tallest waterfall and one of the top 10, maybe top 5 in the world. It really just depends whether or not you count Cascades. Now, there are a variety of ways to see Yosemite Falls, aside from just being just about anywhere in the valley and looking up at the thing. You can take a short walk to the lower falls, which alone are 320 feet tall. Or you can take the upper Yosemite Falls trail to get an amazing view of the 1,430-foot upper tier. The hike is 6.6 miles out and back with 3,200 feet of elevation gain, but if all you care about is the falls, I'd say turning around about halfway through is sufficient enough. Yosemite Falls is undoubtedly one of the most beautiful waterfalls in the world, but it's not number 1 on this list. That honor goes to Nevada Falls, which are the other falls that can be accessed by the mist trail. Now, I've seen tons of waterfalls around the world up to this point, and none have been able to top Nevada Falls for me. So yes, it isn't just my favorite waterfall in California, it's my favorite, period. It stands 594 feet tall, but it looks like it's a good 500 feet taller because of how much water is coming off this thing. Like Vernal Falls, it's also possible to get an amazing view from the top of Nevada, and that's an absolutely awesome place to rest up and take a food break. My favorite view of Nevada Falls can be found while hiking the loop trail back around to Vernal from the top of Nevada Falls. The view you get looking out over the falls with Yosemite's incredible granite peaks is something I can't describe in words. I can't wait until the next time I get to visit this one, and I hope you get the chance to see it and the rest of the waterfalls on my list. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to Travel Dash for more content like this in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye guys.